Welcome to Startup with Poland, where we speak with key and interesting figures who are rocking the Polish startup ecosystem. My name is Tessa McIver, and I'm your host. Now, today, my guest is certainly playing a diverse role in the Polish startup ecosystem. She has worked for public institutions, accelerators, and venture capital funds. Izabela Bany is currently head of communications at Aper Ventures, where she supports how the fund's portfolio companies communicate to the market and obviously has a deep understanding of how VC firms should communicate to startups. So welcome, Izabela. Great to have you with us.
I'm very happy to be here.
Now, your background is very diverse. You've worked for PFR, you've worked in an accelerator, you're now in the VC world. Could you tell us about how those roles differ from each other and how they have allowed you to gain a bigger and better insight into startups themselves?
That's a big question. I would say there are a lot of similarities between them to start from the opposite side. They all focus on startup technology, developing the ecosystem that we have in Poland and in region. But in each of those places, I've learned something different. In a startup, you learn how to prioritize, you keep testing, learning. You kind of like this little scientist who needs to put a hypothesis into work and check if the market will validate it, if people will reject your idea. So this is very exciting. And actually in the startup world, it was the first time when I've learned about VCs, investment, how does it work? Because one of my last tasks in Neton was actually announcing the investment, and before that kind of following how it was done. In a PFR, it was great because I had a chance to kind of sort my knowledge, to kind of follow the trends, reports, what is going on. So it was a great experience to kind of learn from this macro standpoint, have this helicopter view of how investors are working with startups, what is missing, what are the trends and so on. It was really great because it's for my current job as a communication specialist, to kind of understand those trends and catch them very early on before even, mainstream gets them. So I can pitch news easily. So this is really useful. And at VC world, you basically learn all the shenanigans, how you check if the startup is doing great job, how you help the company if it's having trouble. So it's really great lesson on leading various businesses, because you can learn from the founders that are in our portfolio, but also from the partners how to manage basically a group of 20-something startups, how to navigate this world. So this is really exciting. And for me, kind of learning from all of those different viewpoints, learning points, it is very useful to kind of understand entire ecosystems and where are some difficulties, what is smoothly working in Poland and so on. So this is really great and makes me excited every day.
Yeah, no, fascinating that you've really been able to put the puzzle together.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like it, definitely.
Yeah. So your specific area of expertise, as you've mentioned, is communications.
Yes, it is.
And what are the most common mistakes that startups make with their communication strategy? I really can't wait to hear the answer to this.
Probably the list would be extremely long, but the basic thing I would say that startups are having this difficulty of finding equilibrium. They either talk about a solution in a way too hyped way, they're making this big fuss about a solution, how they're going to change the entire world and so on, when the solution is really tiny thing that improves the life, but it's not a massive. Or on the other hand, they are using so many details that you are lost in them, that it's really difficult to get okay, but what is the impact of your solution? Why does it matter? And funny thing is, because I'm working with engineers and scientists who decided to build a startup who turned entrepreneurs. And the mistake is both on their side, they keep being too vague and too specific. And it's exactly the same way with non-deep tech startups, so to be honest. So I would say this is the most common mistake. But it's exciting, you know, to see that it is not the matter, you know, of education, background, and so on. It's simply our way of speaking and kind of being excited about the topic in different ways. So I would say this is something I see most often. Luckily, it's easy to fix. So my job is not hectic on this area.
Well, it must be quite fascinating actually to be able to come into those worlds and be able to advise. You know, nobody understands what you're saying.
My favorite part is that back in high school, I was really excited about physics. Like, this is one of my top subjects. But I really didn't like chemistry. And currently I'm mainly working with chemical startups, to be honest. So like every day I have, you know, a chemistry book on my table back at home or in the office, kind of trying to understand, okay, what are olefins? What are reactions? And so on. Like, oh my gosh, this is so annoying. Like, I should have been following chemistry way more closely back in high school. But it's still, I'm happy that, you know, I'm able to still learn and feel, you know, like I can actually learn about science and engineering like every day, basically, even though I'm doing something very soft like communication, but I do need to understand like what is the science behind every solution.
Well, no, fascinating. Well, I think many of us, if we could go back to our school days and redo our focus, we probably would. I know.
Exactly.
I know I would have done. But back to the communications from the other perspective. So from the perspective of a VC fund, you know, what should startups be looking out for when it comes to, you know, what VCs communicate about themselves?
Probably to give like very specific piece of advice to founders, like read between lines. That is something that I would say, because especially in Poland, where communication from like VC side is very young, like only few VCs in Poland have a person like me who's responsible for communication. So they message is quite often, you know, like very basic. There are not too many, you know, like extra things added. There are a few examples of those, but you can find a lot of like really useful information in those, you know, press releases and like blog posts and LinkedIn posts. But if you read between the lines, you can see that, okay, they prioritize experience. So like going to this particular VC when you're a first-time founder is probably not the best idea. Sometimes they focus a lot on like telling you about the solution. Okay, so you need to pay way more attention to presenting to them like technology behind your idea. Okay. So I would say this is something that is currently the most important thing for founders, to like understand this idea. Like, don't read the text, like try to really understand why it is written why it's written this way, what is missing, where is the highlight. I hope it will change, because like I do see the difference like in the span of even the past year, where, you know, the VCs are starting to like be more direct with what they expect. Okay. Probably they'll learn from those who did it in the past, and they keep learning and so on. So I do hope, like, if we meet in a year, I will probably give a different advice, because like there will be nothing to read between lines. Everything will be out in the open. But for now, probably this is something that I would do if I were a founder. Okay, well, let's hope that indeed in a year's time, we need to put in our diaries and check the status in this time next year. Izabela, you particularly advocate for deep tech startups. Why? Is it because of your love of physics from school? Probably. I mean, frankly speaking, me getting a top grade in my advanced physics back in high school exams, it is my proudest moment. Like, if somebody asked me, Izabela, what's the thing you're still proud of back from school? This is it, like my physics degree. But yeah, probably in other life, I would be an engineer. I do love it. But back from my university years, I've learned about stakeholder theory. You know, how you need to bring the value to like different stakeholders whenever you're creating a company. And in a deep tech world, it's particularly interesting because most of the solutions are coming from academia. But then when you develop in a company, in a deep tech startups, like you need to check if the academic community is still on board with your solution, if you haven't hyped it or you haven't, you know, outgrown the science too quickly, so it's not viable. So it's really interesting to see, you know, this constant discussion and like value actually brought between brought between academia and startup. And then obviously it goes to the outer world, to clients, to employees, to investors. So I would say like seeing the stakeholder theory like in action in a very kind of niche subjects of like scientists turned entrepreneurs is really interesting to me, because you really see like where like those difficulties lies, but also also what kind of a big value it is when science is developed in a different way, when you know from like academia, from like this traditional way of doing like science in a lab. I think that's fascinating, to be honest, in deep tech.
No, definitely. I mean, I must say from my experience of, for example, sometimes talking to the CEO of a deep tech company, they are amazing, obviously, you know, IQ of you know, 1 million.
Talented.
However, often they don't have that business part. And I mean, I must can imagine it must be fascinating to work with people who have such a brain, have invented something really innovative.
True.
However, you know, transforming that into a business must be a challenge, but a challenge that's very satisfying.
It is. That's again where stakeholder comes in, because then you have, you know, an investor who not only invests money but does a smart money investment, and they support the startup, you know, to gain clients, to understand business, to like push even the founder to like increase their sales if needed, because like founders get so wound up in like scientific discoveries. So this is really interesting to see. Like currently, I am working with a startup where there is like a serial entrepreneur who started like multiple companies, and he's working with like ex-Mars rover engineer back from like studies, who's been always, you know, so much focused on like developing technology. So it's really great how they interact together. Obviously, the serial entrepreneur is, you know, responsible for sales, like running the company, but like the secret sauce is actually the engineer who's, you know, having this massive knowledge, and he's actually incorporating, you know, cosmic technology into like a solution that we are using actually here on Earth.
Yeah.
So this is great.
Wow. In terms of promoting a deep tech startup as opposed to any other type of startup, what are the key differences?
I would say that when I was working with a fintech startup, I never had to assure the founder that I'm going to respect the technology behind the solution, even though it was an AI solution for like cybersecurity. Like more important was to deliver the value to clients. While with scientists, it is important to kind of make sure that you respect the entire process behind the startup, the creation of the technology. That's why, you know, I'm always coming to the meetings, you know, with those textbooks from high school, like, you know, I'm learning, you know I don't have a PhD on the topic. So I'd say this is really important, kind of keeping in bay the hype about the solution. I mean, some of those are really exciting, like really groundbreaking changes. This is the definition of deep tech, that the change is not gradual. It's like a complete opposite of what was currently being done. So kind of not to roll with it and like be conscious of like, okay, we need to announce this round of the solution in a way that would be understandable to the public, but it would also we will make sure that the clients who need to understand how does the solution work, not to feel like, oh, we are like overdoing it and probably it's a fake. So it's like a really lovely thing of like keeping this equilibrium, I would say, when you're communicating it, and, you know, finding this like one really interesting thing you know, about the solution that would be interesting also for the mainstream public. Since I am a passionate about science and engineering, for me, I would say it's very easy, because like even a single data, like you can build an entire story about it, basically. We do have in a portfolio back in Aper Ventures, this startup that can monitor the quality of a tap bottle, and it can find, you know, a problem as small as a pinhead issue on the bottle. And it is so interesting, you know, it can build an entire story on a single data, like, okay, it's like a millimeter wrongdoing on the production, on the manufacturing of this bottle, and you can build, you know, a massive press release basically about it and get interest from the journalists, because you can tell the story. Even though you're not paying that much attention to the technology itself, you can do it if you're excited and you know what might excite other people about science.
Well, indeed. I mean, you know, a lot of, I suppose, communication is about getting people excited, you know, and people who may not naturally understand or feel excited about a particular solution.
They might still fear, you know, physics or chemistry back from high school. It is such a shame that they have a bad experience with it. So you can actually turn their minds about it back in adulthood when they read those kinds of news about great deep tech startups.
For sure. And talking about being excited, What excites you in general as a whole about being part of the startup ecosystem, about working with startups? You know, when you get up in the morning and know that you're going to be spending the day working with founders, with startups. And second part of the question, that's the first part, but second part, I love predictions. I love, crystal ball gazing. And I'd really like your view on where the Polish startup ecosystem will be in the sort of, medium term or even long term future.
I would say what gets me up from the bed in the morning is the fact that there are so many ideas out there. And, there are people who create them. They really want to change the world. It's rarely, you're in a startup world to get, extremely rich. There are better ways to do it. But those people really have, a problem in mind that they want to solve it the best way they can with the best team they can gather. So this is really great. And there are so many tools to validate those ideas. This is something that, is present here and there in various industries, but in startup world you have like this entire toolbox of ways to like check if the idea is valid, if it's a good idea, if the market will accept it. So this is really great. And I would say this is something that is currently happening in Poland in our ecosystem, that, we have had this first check which ideas are valid, how it can grow, like which VCs have a good way of investing and which made some mistakes. So I would say it's with like current financial period is kind of running, we're kind of running out of money. Like I'm really looking forward to, VCs going big, like investing in the region rather than only in Poland, kind of, focusing more on gaining money from European Investment Bank. I feel like this is really exciting time ahead of us to see, because VCs are going to get so much more professional, and they like insights are going to be so great, and for founders are going to be way more money, and more importantly, smart money. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I keep my fingers crossed that with the next financial period, like this is going to be something we'll be seeing way more than in the past.
Well, I very much hope so, and we'll meet again when this all happens.
Yes,
and these
let's do it.
And discuss what's changed. But
definitely.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to talk to you, and wonderful to hear a bit more about working particularly with deep tech startups and all the exciting scientific innovations out there. So
My
thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank
It's
you
been
so
a pleasure.
much.
And thank you to our audience, and see you next time for Startup with Poland.